Can a human truly fear their own creation? What dark secret lies behind Moxon's invention? And how does the confrontation between man and his artificial intelligence end? Join Classic Storytime Hub as we explore Moxon's Master by Ambrose Bierce, a reimagined English version full of suspense and psychological horror that will make you question the limits of science and technology.
Are you serious? You actually think a machine can think? There was no immediate answer. Moxon's gaze was fixed on the glowing embers in the fireplace, his hand moving with careful precision, poking here and there, coaxing a brighter flicker from the coals. For weeks now, I had noticed a peculiar habit forming in him. He delayed his replies, even to the simplest questions, but it wasn't indecision that I saw in his eyes. It was as if something heavy rested on his mind, a thought that refused to be shared. Finally, he spoke, his voice calm, almost detached. What is a machine, really? Dictionaries offer many definitions. One says, any instrument or organization through which power is applied to produce a desired effect. By that measure, is a man not a machine too? He applies power, moves, reacts, and thinks, or at least believes he does. I couldn't hold back my irritation. Moxon, stop dodging! I don't mean a man. I mean something made by man, controlled by him, nothing else. He rose suddenly, moving to the window, staring into the storm-dark night. Lightning flashed briefly, illuminating the contours of his face in stark relief. Then, turning back, a faint, almost mischievous smile touched his lips. "My apologies," he said softly. "I did not mean to evade. The dictionary man's words, they just seemed too telling, too suggestive to ignore. But to answer you plainly, I do believe a machine thinks. Not like you or I, perhaps, but it considers the work it performs, it acts upon it, it reasons in its own strange, mechanical way." That was a sharp answer, too sharp, perhaps. It left a bitter taste, confirming a nagging suspicion I had long harbored. Moxon's relentless devotion to his studies and to the machines in his workshop had not been without cost. I knew he struggled with insomnia, and anyone who has battled it knows how it gnaws at the mind. Had it warped his thinking? His response earlier seemed to suggest so, though perhaps with age and hindsight I might interpret it differently now. Fueled by that irresistible spark of youthful debate, I pressed on. "And what, pray tell, does it think with when it has no brain?" His reply came quicker than usual, in the form I had come to expect from him, a counter-question. "What is which a plant thinks when it has no brain?" I couldn't resist a hint of irony. "Ah, so plants have philosophies too. I would be delighted to hear some of their conclusions. Feel free to skip the premises." Moxon didn't flinch, didn't even smile at my jest. Instead, his tone remained deliberate, almost instructive. "Perhaps you could infer their beliefs from their actions," he said. "Consider the sensitive mimosa, or the insect-eating flowers, or those whose stamens bend and shake pollen onto visiting bees so distant mates may be fertilized. But let me offer you a more telling observation. In my garden, I planted a climbing vine in an open spot. Barely above the ground, I drove a stake into the soil about a yard away. Immediately, the vine reached for it. Yet, just as it neared the stake after several days, I moved it a few feet farther. The vine changed direction instantly, bending sharply as if calculating the new path, and pressed once more toward the stake. This dance continued for several days. Each time I moved the target, the vine adjusted, angled itself, reached again. And yet, finally, as if weary of the game, it gave up. Ignoring my attempts to mislead it, the vine stretched toward a small tree further away and climbed it with patient determination.
Eucalyptus roots are remarkable in their persistence, Moxon continued, his voice low, almost reverent. A horticulturist once described one that entered an old drain pipe. It followed the pipe until it reached a break where a section had been removed to make way for a stone wall. Undeterred, the root traced the wall until it found a gap, slipped through it, and continued along the other side until it returned to the drain, entering the unexplored section and resuming its journey as though nothing had happened. "And all this?" I began, incredulous. "Do you fail to see its meaning?" he interrupted, eyes gleaming. "It proves that plants are conscious. They think, in their way, just as surely as we do." I shook my head. Even if that was so, what of it? We were speaking of machines, not plants. Machines are made of wood stripped of life, or cold metal. Are you suggesting that thinking belongs to stone and steel as well? Moxon smiled faintly, leaning closer, the shadows of the fire flickering across his face. "And how else do you explain phenomena like crystallization?" "I don't explain them," I said cautiously. "Of course not," he replied, voice now almost sharp with intensity, "because to explain them, you would have to admit what you are desperate to deny, that even the simplest elements can cooperate intelligently. Soldiers form lines and squares, and you call it reason. Wild geese fly in a perfect V, and you call it instinct. But when the atoms of a mineral, free in solution, arrange themselves into geometrically perfect shapes, or when frozen water forms the symmetrical beauty of a snowflake, you have no word, nothing to conceal the brilliance of what you refuse to recognize." Moxon's words came faster now, his usual calm replaced by a rare urgency, a kind of fierce animation I had never seen him in before. As he paused, a sound drifted from the adjoining room, the machine shop, a place forbidden to all but him. A sharp, rhythmic thumping echoed through the walls, like someone pounding a table with their hand. Moxon heard it too. His eyes widened, his body tensed, and in a sudden burst of motion, he darted into the workshop. My curiosity, tinged, I admit, with a hint of the improper, made me lean closer, straining to hear. Not at the keyhole, no, I would not be so crude, but close enough to catch the strange symphony of conflict within, scuffling, the floor vibrating with impact, a harsh, ragged breath, and then a hoarse, venomous whisper, "Damn you!" Then silence. Moments later, Moxon returned, brushing off the interruption with a small, almost embarrassed smile. "Pardon my abrupt departure," he said casually. "I have a machine in there. It lost its temper." I couldn't resist a quip, letting my gaze linger on the 4 parallel scratches across his left cheek, bright with fresh blood. "Perhaps you might consider trimming its nails." He ignored me entirely. No acknowledgement. He sat back down as if nothing had happened and resumed his discourse, his voice steady again, carrying the weight of conviction. "Surely you do not align with those, there is no need to name them, who claim all matter is sentient, that every atom is a living, conscious being. I do. In my view, nothing is inert, nothing is dead. Every particle of matter pulses with force, potential and actual, sensitive to its surroundings, influenced by higher forms, responsive to energies it encounters, especially when shaped by humans, molded into instruments of will. Matter thinks, acts, reacts, even if in ways we scarcely perceive.
It absorbs something of the mind that shapes it, its intelligence, its intent, and the more intricate the machine, the deeper the trace it carries of its creator's thought and purpose, Moxon said, leaning closer, his eyes glinting with the thrill of discovery. "Do you recall Herbert Spencer's definition of life?"
he continued. "I read it 30 years ago, and nothing I've encountered since has come close. Perhaps he revised it, I do not know, but in all that time I've found nothing to add, nothing to take away. It's not just the best definition, it seems to me the only one that fits." He recited it slowly, as though savoring each word. "Life," he wrote, "is a definite combination of heterogeneous changes, both simultaneous and successive, in correspondence with external coexistences and sequences." "That explains the phenomenon," I said, "but it tells us nothing of the cause." "Exactly," he replied, his voice calm, deliberate. "A definition can do no more. As Mill pointed out, we know cause only as something preceding, effect only as something following. Observe any recurring phenomenon. One never occurs without another, and they differ. You might see a rabbit chased by a dog, and if you never saw rabbits and dogs separately, you could conclude the rabbit causes the dog." He chuckled, shaking his head. "Though I fear my rabbit is leading me far from my real quarry. I enjoy the chase too much. What I want you to notice is this. In Spencer's definition, the activity of a machine qualifies as life. Every condition of life, every measure of vitality applies to a machine in motion. If a man is alive while at work, then, by the same measure, so is the machine he sets in motion. As one who builds and observes machines, I know this is true." Moxon fell silent, his gaze drifting into the fire, as though the flames alone held the answers. The hour had grown late, and I felt it was time to take my leave, yet the thought of leaving him there, in that lonely, isolated house, alone except for whatever presence lingered in his workshop, a presence whose nature I could only guess at, unfriendly, perhaps even sinister, made me hesitate. I leaned forward, searching his eyes, and motioned toward the workshop door. "Moxon," I asked quietly, "who or what do you have in there?" To my surprise, he laughed lightly, almost dismissively, and replied without a hint of hesitation, "No one. The episode you imagine was caused by my own foolishness, leaving a machine running with nothing to work upon, while I embarked on the endless task of enlightening your understanding. Do you know that consciousness is the creature of rhythm?" I threw up my hands in mock exasperation. "Ah, bother them both," I said, reaching for my overcoat. "Good night, Moxon, and I do hope that the next time your machine is left in action, she'll have her gloves on." Without waiting to see his reaction, I stepped into the night. Rain fell steadily, drumming on the rough wooden planks and the unpaved, miry streets I navigated as I made my way toward the faint glow of the city beyond the hill. Behind me, nothing remained visible but a single window of Moxon's house. It burned with a strange, almost fateful light, as if holding secrets that were never meant to leave its walls.
I knew the light came from the uncurtained window of Moxon's machine shop, and I had little doubt that he had returned to his studies, interrupted only by his role as my guide into the mysteries of mechanical consciousness and the elusive fatherhood of rhythm. Odd, even somewhat humorous, his convictions had seemed to me at the time, but I could not shake the sense that they were intimately tied to his life, perhaps even to his fate. They were not the ramblings of a disturbed mind. No, his logic was far too precise for that. Again and again his words echoed in my mind. Consciousness is the creature of rhythm. Stark and concise, yet endlessly compelling. With each repetition, the phrase grew broader, deeper, charged with meaning. Here, I realized, was the seed of a philosophy. If consciousness springs from rhythm, then all things must be conscious. All things move, and all motion has rhythm. I wondered, did Moxon grasp the full weight of his insight?
Had he arrived at this belief through painstaking observation, or did he intuit its truth without knowing its vast implications? At that moment, the idea was new to me, and all of Moxon's earlier explanations had failed to convert me. Yet now, standing there amidst storm, darkness, and solitude, I felt as if a great light had descended, like that which shone upon Saul of Tarsus. I experienced what Lewes describes as the endless variety and excitement of philosophic thought. A thrill of knowledge surged through me, a fresh pride in reason. My feet barely touched the wet, uneven ground. It was as though invisible wings lifted me, carrying me above the streets, above the rain, above the ordinary world, into a vast expanse of thought and revelation. Compelled by an irresistible impulse to seek more guidance from the man I now recognized as my master, I had somehow turned back, and before I knew it, I stood once again at Moxon's door. Rain drenched me to the bone, yet I felt no discomfort. My excitement was too great. Unable to locate the doorbell in my haste, I instinctively tried the knob. It gave way. I entered and ascended the stairs to the room I had so recently left. Darkness enveloped me. As I had expected, Moxon was in the adjoining room, the fabled machine shop. I groped along the wall until I found the connecting door, knocking loudly several times. There was no response, though the fierce wind and the rain driving against the thin walls made the house tremble. The unsealed roof above drummed in relentless rhythm with the storm. I had never been allowed inside the machine shop. No one had, save for a skilled metalworker named Haley, a man of few words and unknown origin. But in my heightened state, caught between awe and exultation, I forgot discretion, civility, everything. I opened the door. What I saw stole all reasoned speculation from me at once. Moxon sat at the far side of a small table, a single candle casting flickering shadows across the room. Opposite him, back to me, was another figure. Between them, a chessboard lay open, pieces scattered in a game clearly nearing its conclusion. I knew little of chess, yet it was obvious. The tension of the match, the silent intensity, was almost tangible. Moxon's focus was absolute, not so much on the game itself, it seemed, as on his opponent. He stared with such intensity that, standing directly in the line of his gaze, I might as well have been invisible. His face was pale, almost ghostly, and his eyes glittered with a diamond-like coldness. I could see only the back of his adversary, but that was enough. I would not have wished to see the man's face. He was short, barely 5 feet, yet built with the proportions of a gorilla. Massive shoulders, a thick squat neck, and a broad head crowned with a tangled mass of black hair under a crimson fez. A matching tunic, tightly belted, draped over what appeared to be a box-like seat. His legs and feet were hidden from view. His left forearm rested in his lap, while the right hand, unnaturally long, moved the chess pieces with slow, deliberate precision. I shrank back into the shadow of the doorway, uncertain whether to enter or retreat. A strange, inexplicable force held me there, as if some imminent tragedy hovered in the room, and I might somehow aid my friend simply by remaining. Against my better judgment, I stayed. The game unfolded rapidly. Moxon barely glanced at the board, moving pieces seemingly at random, yet his motions carried a tense, nervous energy, precise only in intent, not in execution. His opponent's responses, however, were mechanical, measured, almost theatrical, slow, deliberate, and maddeningly consistent, testing my patience with every motion. There was something unearthly about the entire scene. I felt a chill run down my spine, though I was already wet and shivering from the rain outside. The room seemed to pulse with a silent, ominous rhythm, as if the pieces themselves held secrets beyond human understanding. 2 or 3 times after moving a piece, the stranger slightly tilted his head, and each time I saw Moxon instinctively shift his king. Then it hit me like a thunderbolt. The man was dumb, and then, horrifyingly, he was a machine, an automaton, a mechanical chess player. I remembered Moxon had once mentioned inventing such a device. Had I, in all my philosophic rapture, failed to see the truth? Had all his lectures on the consciousness of machines been nothing more than a prelude to unveiling this creation? A clever ruse designed to intensify the impact of his automaton on my ignorance? It seemed a bitter anticlimax to my intellectual ecstasy, my endless variety and excitement of philosophic thought. I was about to turn away in disgust when something compelled me to watch. The machine shrugged its enormous shoulders, a gesture so natural, so unmistakably human that it startled me. A moment later, it struck the table sharply with a clenched hand. Moxon flinched. The man, the machine, whatever it was, had startled him as much as me. He pushed his chair back, alarm flashing across his face. Then it was Moxon's turn. He raised his hand high, descending upon one of his pieces with the precision of a hawk, and exclaimed, "Checkmate!" Rising swiftly, he stepped behind his chair. The automaton remained perfectly still. Outside, the wind had subsided, but the storm still lingered. Thunder rolled across the heavens, now spaced, now closer, its echoes swelling and fading. Between the rumbles, I became aware of another sound, a low mechanical hum. Louder, clearer, unmistakable, a whirring of gears emanating from the body of the automaton. At that moment, all philosophical speculation, all rational explanation fell away. The truth stood stark before me. This was no mere game. This was intelligence, artificial yet undeniable, alive with purpose and motion, and entirely beyond my previous comprehension.
It struck me first as a mechanism gone awry, a device whose regulating parts had been violently displaced, like a pawl forced from the teeth of a ratchet wheel. But before I could dwell on what it might be, the automaton itself seized my attention. A subtle, continuous convulsion ran through its body, jerking its head and limbs as if gripped by ague or palsy. The motion grew more violent with each passing moment, until the entire figure trembled and shook with an almost living frenzy. Then, with a speed that blurred the eye, it sprang to its feet and lunged across the table and chairs, arms outstretched like a diver in midair. Moxon tried to recoil, to escape, but he was too slow. The iron hands closed around his throat. Moxon's own clutch sought their wrists in vain. The table toppled, the candle was thrown to the floor and snuffed out, and darkness swallowed everything. Yet the sounds of the struggle were horrific, the crashing of furniture, the snapping of splintering wood, and above all, the strangled, raucous gasps of Moxon fighting for air. Driven by instinct, I lunged into the blackness toward him. Then the room erupted in a blinding white light, burning itself into my eyes, my brain, my very memory. I saw the scene in ghastly clarity. Moxon beneath the automaton, his throat caught in those iron hands, his head arched backward, eyes bulging, mouth agape, tongue thrust out in desperate struggle. And the machine? Horrible, perfect contrast, its painted face serene, calm, as if absorbed in the solution of a chess problem. And then darkness, silence. 3 days later, I woke in a hospital bed, the fog of unconsciousness slowly lifting. As my mind cleared, the memories of that terrible night returned, each one sharper, more vivid, until I recognized in my attendant Moxon's trusted workman, Haley. He met my gaze and smiled quietly. "Tell me about it," I whispered, my voice weak. "Everything, all of it." "Certainly," he said. "You were carried out unconscious from a burning house, Moxon's house. No one knows how you came to be inside. You may have to explain that. As for the fire, its origin is somewhat mysterious.
My guess? Lightning. And Moxon? I asked, my throat tightening. He was buried yesterday. What was left of him? For a man of few words, Haley could unfold himself when the occasion demanded. His calm, measured tone contrasted sharply with the horror of his words. After a moment of painful silence, I asked another question, barely daring to speak. Who rescued me? Well, he said gravely, if that is what you wish to know, I did. Thank you, Mr. Haley. May God bless you for it. And the automaton, your creation, the chess player that killed its own inventor? Haley looked away, silent for a long, almost unbearable pause. Then he turned back, his eyes grave. Do you know that? He asked. I do, I replied, my voice firm despite the tremor. I saw it happen. That was many years ago. Today, if asked, I might answer with less certainty. Time has a way of softening the sharpest edges of memory, but never entirely.
And thus the story ended. If you liked this journey into the worlds of classic literature, do not forget to support us by subscribing so we can tell you more. And hey, if there's a classic tale you'd love to hear told in this suspenseful style, drop its name in the comments below. Your suggestion might be our next chilling adventure.